Hey y'all, welcome to Sandy's Library. I'm Sandy, and in this video I'm going to read you some more of my book, If I Had Married You. And just as a reminder, this is not a professional production. It's just an author reading her book. So let's get started. Chapter 20. About a week after Jason's birthday, your parents came to visit for a couple of weeks. Little did we know, but they also had a present for us. A weekend away at a nearby resort for the last weekend in July. It was a cheap price to pay, they said, for the opportunity to spend a weekend with their grandsons. It had been a long time since we'd had a night together without the kids. The last time was the night we renewed our vows in Hawaii. The resort was about 25 miles from Fort Dickerson along the coast. It was exclusive and private. We had dinner both nights on the deck off our hotel room. Tiki torches provided our only light, while a soft breeze blew in from the inlet. We drank champagne and dined on oysters on the half shell. For dessert, chocolate-covered strawberries. It was all very picturesque and romantic. 3 weeks later, I sent you to the PX to buy a home pregnancy test. When you returned, I was in the kitchen loading the dishwasher. The boys were playing between the kitchen and dining rooms. You set the plastic bag from the PX on the counter in front of me, and then you kissed my cheek. "This is nerve-wracking," you said, with a hint of laughter. "I can't imagine you having to do this by yourself." You reached for my hand as sadness grew in your eyes. "I'm sorry," you said, kissing the tips of my fingers. Shaking your head, you said, "I had no idea." See, that was just like you. You'd missed out on so much. Yet you were more concerned with how all of this had affected me. I wrapped my arms around your neck. "You're here now," I said, and kissed you. "That's all that matters." "Tell me," you draped your arms loosely around my waist. "How did I ever manage to win your love?" I shrugged and glanced away shyly. "Lucky, I guess." You chuckled and said, "How about two?" "Two?" I asked. "Test," you said. "I figured you wouldn't want to wait until the morning. Back then, women were still instructed to use their first morning urine, especially if they were only days late." You said, so I bought a second test to back up or refute today's midday test. "You know me too well," I said, dragging the plastic bag off the counter. I headed for the bathroom downstairs. A few minutes later, I came back out, holding the test stick behind my back. You glanced up at me, but I had painted on my poker face before leaving the bathroom. You said, "So, how long do we have to wait for the results?" "Not long," I said, stopping at your side and handed you the stick. On it, there were 2 small windows, and each one had a line across the center. You stared at it, and after a couple of seconds, your questioning eyes drifted up to mine. You asked, "What does this mean?" "It means," I said, "we're going to need a bigger vehicle." I had no idea just how right I was about that until at about the 9th week, while listening to the baby's heartbeat, the doctor heard too. After Captain Slade had left us, you scooped me into your arms and twirled me around the room. "Isn't it great?" you asked. "A twofer." I couldn't help but laugh as I hugged you. Twins. Maybe I'd get lucky and at least one of them would be a girl. You had this special relationship with the boys that I could never understand or hope to share in. It was that "we're all males" thing. I longed for a little girl to share my own special bond with. The ultrasounds were more frequent with this pregnancy because there were 2 babies. By the 18th week, and just before Thanksgiving, I was headed for my 3rd ultrasound and I had high hopes that the babies would position themselves favorably this time. You had opted to stay at work that day after the last 2 scans had shown nothing definitive about the sex of either baby. We both figured there was no point in you tagging along. Besides, we were PCSing in January to Camp Davidson in South Carolina, where you'd be taking command of a company and a special weapons unit down there, so you were busy. You knew the brigade staff officer at Camp Davidson, Major Cicada, from your time in OCS. You and the Major had gotten along well, and you were looking forward to working with him again. I also knew that Major Cicada's time in his grade was nearing the required amount for promotional opportunities. I was also aware that, by then, you'd have in your required amount of time served for promotion too. Sure, you being promoted to major might mean more responsibility for me with the wives, but I was willing to do whatever I could help you to succeed. And it was never too early to start, even though I was carrying twins and the pregnancy was considered high risk. If it caused you to be away from work too frequently, this information could be used unofficially against you the next time you were up for promotion. So, unless something really bad happened to me or the kids, I was always going to support you staying at work, no matter what was going on with me. Inside the exam room at Fort Dickerson's post hospital, a shiver ran through me as Captain Slade rolled the machine's wand around in the cold goop on my bulging belly. Carrying twins, I looked like I was closer to 6 months along, rather than only pushing 5. On the monitor, I could see their hearts beating, and I could make out their heads, but not much more beyond that, so I looked back at Captain Slade. She pointed to the monitor. "Look at that." Then she pushed a button or two. "What?" I asked. "Looks like baby A is a girl." My breath caught in my throat. I was getting my girl. "And baby B?" I asked. "Can you tell?" The doctor nudged the other side of my tummy. "Come on," she said. "Turn this way." After a second or two, she added, "There we go. Just a little bit more. I gotcha." She pushed the buttons again. "Well?" I asked, and probably a little too anxiously. She said, "Baby B is also a girl." Captain Slade knew how much I wanted a girl and how much I wanted these babies to arrive healthy. She gave me a soft smile. "Both appear to be quite healthy," she said, "and very near the same size, although baby A is slightly bigger than baby B." After I left the hospital, I went straight to the PX and bought 2 pair of pink booties and a small gift box designed for a baby shower. I wrapped each booty loosely in blue tissue, just to psych you out. It almost worked. When you came home from work that evening, Junior ran to greet you, and Jason tagged along behind. Junior had the gift box, and he was shoving it at you. Jason was jumping up and down, excited, but about what he wasn't sure. Both boys were screaming some form of the words, "Open it, Daddy, open it." You looked at me and smiled, as if you knew at least one of the babies had cooperated today. You were used to getting these gift boxes by now. You knew what was inside. You just didn't know the color of the booties. You lifted the lid and saw the 2 bundles of blue tissue, and you almost smiled. Almost. Then you laughed as you glanced up at me and asked, "That's a trick, right?" You Army types catch on quick. I kissed you, then added, "Keep digging, soldier." You latched onto both sets of tissue-wrapped booties and pulled them out of the box. Unfolding the tissue on the first one, you grinned when you saw the pink booties. You glanced up at me. "A girl?" you asked hopefully. "We're having a girl?" I nodded. You wrapped me cozily in your embrace, saying, "That's wonderful, darling. I'm going to spoil her rotten. What about baby 2? I asked, with a measure of teasing. As if suddenly remembering there was another discovery to be made, you set about revealing it. When you saw the second set of pink booties, the most divine smile painted your face. 2 little girls, you said, embracing me again, to go with our 2 boys. It's perfect. My original due date was April 19th, but since I was carrying twins, it had been pushed back to March 29th. Considering that we were PCSing in January to Camp Davidson in South Carolina, I had a lingering fear about moving during the latter part of a high-risk pregnancy. You were great, though. This was one PCS where I did not lift a finger on either side of the move. You wouldn't let me. Nothing was more important to you than me and our babies. Chapter 21. The morning of April 1st was a cool one at Camp Davidson. The night before, I'd been incredibly restless. You'd stayed up half the night trying to comfort me by rubbing my back while I lay there on my side, yet unable to find the sweet spot. About 4 a.m., you'd fallen asleep. At 6, I hesitated to wake you, but if I was reading the clock correctly, my contractions had been about 5 minutes apart for roughly an hour. It was probably time to wake your mother. She'd flown in a few days earlier, and we'd be taking care of the boys when we went to the hospital to have the babies. I was beyond thrilled that you were going to be home when the girls were born. You missed that when I had the boys, so I was happy that you'd get to witness firsthand the girls' births at least. Another pain pulled me into its grip. They were getting stronger. I shook your arm gently and said, "Babe." You opened your eyes and asked calmly, "Are you okay?" "Yeah," I said softly. "I think it's time to go to the hospital." You leapt up and repeated your question. "Are you okay?" You glanced at my mountainous belly. "Are you in pain?" Slowly your eyes drifted back up to mine, and I saw genuine concern in them for me. You hated the thought of being the indirect cause of my pain. "My love," I shook my head and reached for your hand. "I'm probably going to curse at you a lot today. I had when Junior and Jason were born. You just weren't there to hear it." I said, "But I'll never stop loving you, not for 1 second." From that moment on, it was like you'd taken some kind of pill or something that made you do and say all the right things. In the hospital, you talked me through each contraction, then you'd swab my face with a cool washcloth in between them, all the while feeding me ice chips to ward off the cotton mouth. To my credit, I didn't curse you at all that day. I was too overjoyed by the fact that you were there with me this time, holding my hand, talking me through it, and doing whatever it took to take my mind off the pain. Grace Catherine, baby A, was born at 1:58 p.m. She weighed 6 pounds and 1 ounce and was 19 inches long. Delia Rose, baby B, arrived a few minutes later at 2:10 p.m. At 5 pounds and 11 ounces and 18.5 inches. Since the beginning, I've always thought that Delia was simply a smaller version of Grace. They were named after our mothers, Grace after mine and Delia after yours, and they were born 6 years to the day from when we met. Both girls were healthy and looked nothing alike beyond their skin tone, which was very much like their brothers. Beautiful combinations of us. The girls' hair turned out to be entirely different from the boys', who are both carbon copies of you, save Junior's blue eyes, and each other. Delia's hair was a shade or two lighter than the boys', and Grace's was even lighter at a cool brown. Both girls' hair is curly as all get out, and their eyes are like their brothers', Grace's are blue, like Junior's, and Delia's are brown, like Jason's. After a couple of days in the NIC unit, merely as a precaution, we were able to take our babies home. Our family was now complete. During the summer, just after the girls turned 2, Major Cicada was promoted to Lieutenant Colonel and became the post Deputy Garrison Commander. This left a staff officer opening in your brigade. I was delighted, and so were you, when you received the nod for the promotion to Major. Now that you were a field grade officer, which meant more scrutinizing eyes would be on me and the kids, that was something I never really understood. I hadn't joined the Army, but damned if it didn't sometimes feel like I had. Nevertheless, I knew the score, so I went with it. I spent my time being a gracious host to a number of brigade functions. I mentored the wives of lower-ranking officers and offered a helping hand with difficult wives, whether they were married to enlisted personnel or officers. Over the years, I've watched marriage after marriage crumble under the weight of Army life. I was determined that that wouldn't happen to us. We would survive it. I had always believed that one day you'd walk away from the Army and I wouldn't have to share you anymore. The wives in these troubled marriages had lost that hope. I was not going to let that happen to me. So, with each new assignment and promotion, I too soldiered on. I handled the separations with poise and grace. They made me appreciate you all the more when you did come home. I guess they had the opposite effect on me that they have on many Army wives. It's a common problem in the Army. Some wives and the occasional husband who are left behind by their soldier are resentful when their spouse returns after a long deployment or unaccompanied tour. In fact, they were pretty much resentful the entire time their soldier was gone. But I suspect it's not just the resentful spouses who are the problem. No, I think the soldier in question bears some responsibility for the demise of the marriage as well. Infrequent phone calls and letters when they're away, couple that with increasing aloofness when they do finally get back home, and it adds to the demise of a marriage, just as much as the resentful wives they've left at home. But you and I, we forged a partnership. We had always been 100% committed to each other, and unlike most wives, at least the ones I've come in contact with, unlike them, I've only ever considered the Army as your job, nothing more. For many wives, the Army became their husband's mistress, but for me, she was never anything more than a way for you to support our family financially while doing something noble for our country. You counted on the Army to protect your family while you were doing it, and she did. Chapter 22. When Junior was 11, Jason 10, and the girls were 6, you left for another year-long unaccompanied tour back to Korea. I was apprehensive about this, of course, because the last time you'd gone there, so had Steve, and he didn't come back. At least, not alive anyway. I shoved my fear aside that the same thing might happen to you, burying it down deep inside my soul. I couldn't have you going over there being less than 100% focused because you were instead back home worrying about me. So I painted on my brave face and wished you well when you left, promising to meet you at the next duty station when your time in Korea was over. While you were gone, I had to get really creative to make sure the kids, especially the twins, didn't forget about their father while you were gone. Of course, we made videos practically daily that would be waiting for you when you got back home. Once a month, we'd make one to send directly to you. In between, we never tired of waiting for your sporadic phone calls. Usually, we'd receive at least one a month. If we were lucky, two. The kids would sometimes get frustrated when they needed their dad, but you weren't there. I'd have to hide my own frustrations in hopes that I could lead them by example. It didn't take long to find ways to remind them that Daddy was coming home. Their favorite, though, was the marbles and mason jars. That one we stumbled upon when the boys were 2 and 3, and you were going out on field maneuvers for 3 weeks. Remember how we went out and got a couple of mason jars where we stenciled days down on one and days to go on the other right before you left? From then on, each time you left, we'd fill the days to go with the same number of marbles as the days you'd be gone. Each day, the kids would take a marble from the days to go jar and drop it into the days down jar. Up until that second Korean tour, the most boys had ever been without you that they remembered was 28 days. The twins were too young to remember that one. And now here we were faced with a days to go jar that had 365 marbles in it. Nevertheless, the kids and I soldiered on. Each evening, they'd take turns swapping one marble from the days to go to the days down jar. During that tour, the kids sent you a special care packages once a month. They included snapshots of the kids and I, drawings from the girls, notes from the boys, and your favorite snacks. We always put it inside the larger box that I'd send to you, which included more pictures and our monthly video, more of your favorite snacks, and a letter from me, and a lot of cookies for the soldiers who weren't receiving much from home. 2 years into our time at Fort Singer in New Mexico, you were promoted to Lieutenant Colonel, taking command of the battalion. At the change of command ceremony, I was given a bouquet of red roses while the kids received unit coins. We spent 2 tours at Fort Singer, which meant that Junior and Jason had the good fortune of going to the same high school all 4 years. Girls, however, weren't so lucky. They were sophomores when you were promoted to colonel and received orders to Fort Lawson in Florida. Junior and Jason were both in college. Junior, to your dismay, did not follow in your footsteps so much as mine. He was earning his degree in music. Like his mother, he wanted to be a music teacher. He'd even gone to the same school as me back in Texas. Jason, on the other hand, was at West Point. Junior had met a lovely girl during sophomore year in college. I knew things were getting serious when he brought Emily to the change of command ceremony. When you took command of the brigade at Fort Lawson, a place that was over 1,000 miles away from Junior and where he was going to college, we spent 2 tours at Fort Lawson and only had to suffer through 1 6-month deployment during that time. At the end of our first tour there, our son married his college sweetheart. The problem was that after the ceremony and honeymoon, we took them to Hawaii, and they returned to Texas, where they'd made their home in my hometown of Willow Falls. And there I was, stuck in Florida, too far from our son. Now we're coming upon the end of our second tour at Fort Lawson. I cannot but wonder what the Army has in store for us now. In 30 years together, I've learned to expect the unexpected. Would they keep us here, or would they offer you a new assignment? And how far away would your new orders take us from the kids? Jason had received his commission and was currently in Georgia. The girls were in college in Florida. Junior and Emily were still in Texas, and it didn't look like they were leaving anytime soon. He was teaching at the local high school, and Emily had a job in advertising. And now that they'd gotten married, I figured grandchildren wouldn't be far behind. I stood by all these years without complaint while the Army took you away from me at her whims. And I'll admit, our children brought me great comfort while you were out in the field or deployed. The question now was, could I stand being thousands of miles away from our children and grandchildren?